excuse me, World Without Cancer and Creatures from Jekyll Island, among many, many other things, and the leader of the Red Pill organization, Red Pill University, Red Pill Expo. He just held, how many, Ed, Red Pill Expos was this?
This is number 13.
Yeah, it's 13. Okay,
13, yeah.
I shorted him. I said it was 10 because I thought it was the 10 of I have been to. I missed some, and Ed has never forgiven me. But ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to Scottsdale, Arizona, Mr. G. Edward Griffin.
Thank you. Look at that. Well, hi, everybody. Good to be here. Good to see you.
So I just wanted you to from your heart, just tell people the story about World Without Cancer, the book, and your story with Dad. And like you and I agreed, we'll just wing it. There's no directive from me. So just the story of World Without Cancer.
Well, okay, that's always fun to tell that story. It's not very dramatic. It's very insightful because, as you'll see, it's got the capacity to change your life. And that certainly did for me. So here's how it began. Dr. John and I were friends. We were working primarily together on political and economic issues, nothing to do with health. I mean, that was his world. And mine was writing and researching and trying to save the world that he was trying to make healthy. We never talked to each other about our respective worlds. It was our common world where we wanted to make the world, better for future generations. We didn't like what was happening on this planet, what was going on in the political arena, loss of our liberties, loss of privacy, and all the rest. And then one day, I was Dr. John and I were known to sort of sneak away now and then, get out of town, go into the countryside, and we pretended like we were going, nature hunting or fishing or something like that. No, just to get out of the way. We were kind of looking for property. We thought someday we'd be nice to get out of the city and have some nice acreage where you can see the horizon without telephone poles and houses in the middle. And one day he said, Ed, I need your help for something. Well, what's that, John? He said, well, I want you to help me write an article for the local newspaper or magazine or something like that. I said, an article? Well, sure, I can help you with that. What's going on? Well, then he said, well, I'm having trouble with the California Medical Association. They're telling me how to run my practice. They're telling me what I can and especially what I cannot do. And they're threatening to take away my license if I don't follow the rules that they're laying down to me. I said, well, why not just do what they want you to do? They said, well, what they want me to do is to stop saving lives. I was stunned. What are you talking about? Stop saving lives. He said, well, look, he said, I'm an ear, nose, and throat specialist. That's what I used to do when we first met. But I started treating cancer in the ear, nose, and throat area, and I was having great success with it. The first thing people heard about it, and they started coming to me for other types of cancer. And the first thing after that, I've got a cancer clinic on my hands. And he said, what has happened is I discovered there is a substance that is found in nature. It doesn't come from the pharmaceutical industry. It's found in nature. And he said, I was very skeptical about it at first. My office manager told me all about it. He said, I should look into it. And he said, I wasn't interested then, but then Ralph Bogan was his office manager's name. And he said, after a while, I got curious. And so I started looking into it, and it seemed like it made sense on paper. The science behind it seemed to be pretty interesting. But he said, I pretty much ignored it. And then finally, my dog had cancer. And we tried all the usual therapies that were authorized and all the things that the California Medical Association wanted me to use on humans. We tried all those things on the dog. They said, of course, they didn't work any better on the dog than they worked on humans. So my poor dog was doomed to be put down. He said, I'll try it on my dog. And I was surprised. I was blown away. He said, very quickly, the dog responded. And as you can see, dog has no cancer. Wow, that's impressive. She said, that's what I'm using, this stuff. He said, and then as I recall a little bit later, his head nurse had a problem. Maybe I'm telling stories out of school here. I shouldn't, but I think all that's ancient history now. But she said, my husband had cancer and they gave him up. And she asked me if I could treat my husband. And he said, well, I'll do it, but we have to be very cautious and very quiet about it because, it's not an approved substance. And besides, it may not work just because it worked on my dog. And she said, well, I don't care. The poor man is going to go anyway. So let's do it. Well, make a long story a little shorter. Her husband recovered. He said, now he said, it really got my attention. So I started using this substance on my patients very cautiously, increasing the dosages, watching and observing how the patients responded. And now he said, I got a full-blown cancer clinic on my hands. And the California Medical Association got wind of it. And they came and told me to stop, or they're going to take away my hospital privileges, going to take away my license. And he said, but look, guys, I'm saving lives. And they said, we don't care. You are not following the rules. The substance you are using is unapproved and untested by us, and therefore it is illegal, and you are breaking the law. He said, now, that's what I want you to help me with, Ed. Could you write up an article and explain this situation, this madness, and sort of to the public and bring it to these experts at the top of the pyramid in that fashion? Maybe they'll let me continue to save lives. I said, well, sure, John, that sounds like a real interesting challenge. So I stupidly took on the challenge. I had no idea, none whatsoever, how much voltage was in the wire I was about to grab hold of. When I got hold of that cancer wire, and all of a sudden, all the pressure that was on John started to focus on me as well. What is going on here? And so the story I unearthed between John and the originator of this whole idea was Dr. Ernst T. Krebs Jr., who also lived in the San Francisco area, and other doctors later on. I discovered this amazing story that I put into the book World Without Cancer, the story of vitamin B17. So that's how I got into it. But I remember my incredulity when he told me this short version of the story that I just described. I could remember thinking, well, why would they do that? Just because it's not unapproved? I mean, you've got the empirical evidence that's saving lives. Who would object to that? Who are these people? Who are they, John? Is what I actually asked him. Who are they, these people you're talking about? Well, I've heard that question asked 1,000 times since that time by others. Who are they? And it's quite a natural question. It came from me quite naturally. I could not imagine that there were any group of people, especially like a medical profession, medical association, especially, or a political body. All these people are concerned about the welfare of their constituents, aren't they? Well, I was to learn that not necessarily. But anyway, so I asked the question, who are they? And so the next, actually a couple of years, I was learning who they are. And that became kind of the backbone of my book, World Without Cancer, because what I discovered is that the science of cancer therapy was not nearly as complicated as the politics of cancer therapy. And I came to that realization thanks to Ralph Bowman, the office manager of Dr. John's, because he was the guy that was sort of pushing Dr. John into this field. And now he was pushing me. He said, look, Ed, you can talk about the science of cancer therapy all day long. It's over most people's head, and they're kind of, their eyes get glazed over after a while. And I confirmed that was true. And he said, but you've got to tell the story of how this came about, because if they don't understand the politics, they will never understand why this is so important. Well, I sort of shunned that idea. I didn't want to go over there on that topic. I thought, we just stick with the science. People want to save their lives, don't they? And that's true, they do. But what I discovered is what Ralph was trying to explain to me, unsuccessfully at first, is that when I told other people about this, after I became fairly informed about it, but I could talk semi-intelligently about the science, it always ended with the response from the other person, something like this: is, "Oh, well, that can't be true. You know, if that were true, my doctor would know about it, wouldn't he?"
Yeah.
Well, that was a stunner, because I thought that's why the politics of cancer therapy was perhaps even more important than the science of cancer therapy. So my book was divided into two parts in the beginning, and actually two volumes, little small books, like those ones you used to see on the bookshelves. Anyway, the first one was the science of cancer therapy, and the second one was the politics. And later on, after the second edition, we decided, oh, heck, let's just put the two together, and it's all been one volume since then. So that's the story of how it came to be. And I guess if you folks are in this meeting with JR Jr. here, you already know about the science and the politics of cancer therapy. So there's no point in going into that. I'm sure John and many of you in the audience can do a very good job of that. So that's the story of how this all started with me.
Wow, that was amazing, Ed. And even though I have explained the science of politics, I hope that you don't mind me. Like I said, we're winging it here, of you telling it from your point of view, because you and I have a difference on whether it was a dog or a cat. Our whole family argues about that, but we've kind of got down to it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was, but of course, we're all truth tellers, and one of the things you always told me is that certain people have a Crusaders gene. So if you don't mind tell a little story about the Crusaders gene, that is amazing, because every single human being in here, I know, and I know for a fact, and I'm hoping to get my tech guys so you can see this audience of amazing people have the Crusaders gene, and they want to take your story, your life's work that you've done, and take it to the world. They're committed with this new situation, this new world we live in, whatever we think of the politics, bring it to the world. So talk a little bit, please, about the Crusaders gene. And then if you would talk from your point of view, the science, because you've talked to all the people that I never got to meet, the science about Laetrile, even though they've already heard from me, many of these people would love to hear it again from you. Do you mind?
Well, no, I more or less expected that's what you were going to ask me to do. But I don't have to work or prepare on that. That's so much a part of my fiber, my whole body is how what motivates me. Maybe I'll put that second and talk about the science first, and then the politics, and then we'll come back to my Crusader gene. How's that?
That's perfect. That's perfect. Everybody here is on the edge of their seat, I can tell you.
Well, don't fall off. Okay, well, yeah, let's see. Science. Really, the science of cancer therapy is amazingly simple. It sounds so complex, and it can be if you want to go into the dark alleys that don't go anywhere. But if you stay on the true path of what cancer really is, if you focus on that first question, what is cancer? It helps a lot, because the orthodox view, pretty much, as you all know, is that, well, we don't really know what cancer is. And they start using these long names, and they talk about different variants and cellular biology, and they give you the diploid pluripotence and all the biological terms for this, that, the other thing, and you think, oh my God, what am I doing here? I'm in the wrong house. And that's how I felt at first. I thought I was the last person in the world to talk about cancer therapy. I knew nothing about biology. I was one of those guys that thought there were two types of people in the world. There were the ones that were sick and the ones who were well. And it was a question of which group you were in. It was pure luck, and I felt so sorry for those sick people. They were unlucky. I was healthy, so I was one of the lucky ones. It never occurred to me that we had any control over our own health destiny, or any responsibility for our own health or sickness. So I really, it was part of the unwashed masses that said, well, if I get sick, I'll go to a good doctor and he'll fix me up, I hope. And so that's how I started into this. And I was the last person, I thought, to deal with this topic. And since then, by the way, it's an interesting sidebar. I've talked to a lot of doctors over the years who have made the transition that Dr. John did, and myself. but mostly these doctors that have made the transition from orthodox therapy, allopathic medicine, to alternative, or not really alternative, the real medicine, I should say. And they almost always say, you know, Ed, you were lucky. And at first I didn't understand that. What do you mean I'm lucky? Because I was so dumb? And basically they said, yes, that's about it. Because all you had to do was learn. What we have to do is first unlearn. Oh, I get it. Yeah. Because these guys are smart, you know, and they're good people, most of them. And they want to help. They want to help. They want to make you well again. But they get trapped into this profession that is so corrupt. And so they had to unlearn all this technical stuff about what cancer is and how you treat it. And they got charts and graphs and all these different types of cancer and everything. And lo and behold, when I talked to Dr. John and went to Dr. Krebs and then started speaking with a few doctors like that who understood what I'm about to say, and they explained it to me several times, I got the information from them that cancer is only one disease. In fact, it's not even a disease. I'll start by saying this. In summary, cancer is not caused by something. Repeat that. Cancer is not caused by something. It is caused by the lack of something. And there is the dividing point between modern medicine and true health, I think. Modern medicine is always looking for something that causes a disease so they can devise a compound, a chemical, or a procedure that will attack this thing that is causing the disease. And that's very profitable because now you have to pay big money for this vial of liquid or a pill or surgery or a machine that's put on you and so forth. That's very profitable. And the whole modern medical field, I learned, is built on the business model that if you cure a patient, you've lost a customer. Yep. So you don't want to lose customers, so you don't cure anybody. It's not on your agenda. You treat them. You treat them. You keep them active. You keep them with the disease, but so they can function. But they're always sick. They're never up to par, and they gradually get sicker and sicker and sicker over a lifetime. And you keep adding more and more drugs to their medicine cabinet, so that they get more and more of your annual income to buy these medicines and these therapies. And so, but you never are cured. Very seldom, if you are cured, it's probably got nothing to do with the therapy that you're receiving. Well, I had to learn that. But once you learn that fundamental fact that cancer is not a disease that we normally think of it caused by a pathogen or something, it's caused by the lack of something. Now it's a deficiency disease, like cancer. I mean, excuse me, like scurvy, pellagra, pernicious anemia. These are all vitamin deficiency diseases, and they can be treated with nutrition. Those are the things that people are lacking. These various elements of nutrition. You put the nutrition back into their systems, and they get well, and you lose a customer. So I had to learn that, but once I learned it, all of a sudden, all the mystery of this whole field faded away, and I could look and always see right to the core of the problem, which is basically what I have just described. And now, so what is the deficiency? Well, there are many deficiencies that can do it, but the one that seems to be the most prominent and ubiquitous are everywhere in the world, all cultures, all age groups, and so forth. Most so-called types of cancer. They're not just types of cancer. They're cancer, the same thing that appears in different organs, basically. And anyway, where was I? I got sidetracked on that thought. But yeah, all of these different types of cancer, really only one is, and the deficiency is a food factor. That's what Dr. Krebs had discovered, and he called it a vitamin B17. Well, it turns out that that substance had been known for a long, long time. It's in the International Pharmacopoeia, I guess by now, way over 100 years ago, and it's called amygdalin. That's its official name, amygdalin. And it's part of the nitriliside family. Where you get into those long names, doesn't make any difference. In other words, it was known, it's found in nature, and it's in approximately 1,400 edible plants. Now, Edible plants. What about how come we have cancer then? Why are we eating these things? Well, the answer is that it's a little bitter. That's all. If you've ever eaten an apple seed, well, you know the flavor I'm talking about is kind of bitter. So if people have a lot of food to eat, and especially if they live in a high-tech society where their food can be processed and sweetened and tweaked a little bit, made to look pretty, and it lasts longer on the grocery shelves so it doesn't rot, all those things added to it, well, they get rid of that bitter flavor and make it taste really good, even make it look good. But step by step over the years, as they did that process, they were eliminating from the food supply of the modern world, the so-called advanced societies, that food element, the nitrosamine, would be removed from their diets. And I think of a couple notable examples. This is all flooding back to my mind now because I don't get a chance to talk about this very much anymore. All talking about the Federal Reserve System and all that. But it's fun letting these thoughts come flooding back. You know, lima beans are not very tasty to me. Some people eat them. I would rather just pass them by on the line to go on to something better. But as dull and sort of bitter as they are, I understand that originally they were really bitter. And at one time, lima beans was loaded with amygdalin, but they've been hybridized because nobody wants to buy the bitter lima beans. So gradually, lima beans are getting sweeter and sweeter and sweeter. Oh, you can sell them now. And the apricot seed, well, that's always been bitter. Not always, actually. The first apricot, I should say, right? Apricot trees are actually, if you notice, they're grafted. There's the sweet apricot and the bitter apricot. And the bitter one is the natural one, I'm told. And somebody discovered a sweet one growing in their orchard, and they said, hey, that's amazing. So they started to graft the branches from the sweet one onto the root stems of the bitter ones. And over a period of a couple of decades, you can drive through Northern California and you can see acres and acres, hundreds of acres of these trees. And you look at about 6 inches or 8 inches off of the ground, you can see where the bark changes its color and pattern. Because every one of those trees had been grafted. And that's because the bitter taste has been removed from the sweet, from the nut. Now you can go to the store and buy these things that are sweet. But in original days, you know, the bitter almonds I'm talking about, I said apricots, I meant to be talking about almonds. Almonds have a nice taste to them now, but originally the trees were always very, very bitter. So those are just 2 examples come to mind of how our food supply has been tweaked with, so that now, if you're living in an affluent society where you can afford sweet and better tasting foods, you're not getting amygdalin in your diet. And wouldn't you know, that just happens to be coincidental with the rise of cancer everywhere in the world. The more primitive a society is, the less cancer they get. That should tell you something right there. So cancer, once you understand that it's a deficiency disease, about 90% of the complexity of understanding cancer therapy is cleared away because you realize that the industry is treating symptoms and not diseases. They don't know what the disease is, so naturally they're never going to fix it. If you don't know what it is, you're not going to fix it. All you can do is just sort of ameliorate the symptoms, keep the patient alive as long as you can. As long as you can treat it, you're making money. And when the money runs out, you stop treating it. And sometimes they get well at that point. I've seen that happen. So that's the science. In a nutshell, science is a deficiency disease. You got it? That's it. You don't have to go to medical school. And you find out what the deficiency is. Now, one more thing needs to be added to that. And that is that sometimes it's not. Your metabolism gets out of whack because it needs many, many nutrients. Some of them are things we never heard of. And when you eat, even when you're eating apricot seeds, you're getting not only amygdalin, but you're getting things in there that probably have never been discovered. I learned early in the day that sometimes people who were cancer patients who actually had clinical cancer couldn't afford the treatment. And they'd say, well, what should you do? Well, I couldn't advise them what to do. I'm not a doctor, but I said, if it were me, I would just go eat as many apricot seeds as I could tolerate without getting toxic on it and see what happens. And on many occasions, I have seen those people recover just from apricot seed. And it seemed amazing because the quantity of amygdalin in an apricot seed, or several of them, or they were eating 5 or 10 a day, or whatever the number was far less than what they would receive in a doctor's office, especially if it was an injectable, where they would get, 3 grams or sometimes 6 grams at a time. And they were only getting small amounts of the seeds. And they weren't eating that many seeds either. And then somebody, it might have been Dr. Krebs, suggested to me, well, Ed, what we don't know is that there are other elements in those fresh seeds that we don't even know about. And maybe there's some synergy between the amygdalin and something else that makes the amygdalin even more potential in its therapeutic value. He says, I'm just guessing, but he said, that would be an explanation. Well, I remembered learning that was true with vitamin C. Vitamin C is good by itself, but when you eat it in the orange or in its natural fruit, you're getting something else with it, and the vitamin C is more powerful in that form than if you just take a pill. I get it. So nature, again, knows more than scientists. And so you come out of this discussion with that knowledge that truth is in nature, not in the test tube. Well, that's the short version of the science of cancer therapy. If you want to get rid of cancer, my recommendation, not a prescription. Well, in fact, I've seen a member of our family do this, so I'll just talk about a member of our family did this, had a cancer developed, just took the apricot seeds, got off of all toxic elements, stopped drinking coffee, smoking, drinking any alcohol. They weren't boozers or anything like that, but they got off of anything that's toxic and stuck with the good, healthy food, especially those things that were known at large amounts of amygdalin, and their cancers went away. And so that's all I can say on that. Now, that's the science of cancer. The politics, well, I mentioned that sort of along the way with it. The politics is that cancer is profitable as long as it's not cured. And that's the bottom line of that. Well, that's a political economic issue that is so tragic but real. It just makes you sick to your stomach to think about it. Most practitioners, in my view, in the medical profession, know that. They actually subconsciously know that their whole profession is aimed at making as much money out of a cancer patient rather than trying to cure their cancer. But they don't focus on it. They focus on, I'm doing my best. I'm doing what I was taught to do. This is what everybody does. And this is very good. I'm living very well too. And if I don't, I'm going to lose my license, like Dr. Richardson was having to worry about. So what am I supposed to do? Go pick garbage out of garbage cans and feed my family? Or am I supposed to cut lawns or what? I'll do what I do. I'll do what I have to do. So I feel sorry for people in that position. They refuse to think about the implications of what they're doing because it's just too horrible for them to adapt to. I tend to get very critical about doctors and nurses who probably understand what I just said at some deep level. But I have to think, they're supporting families and they live in a community where it's all reinforcement in one way. And anybody who talks like I do is probably considered to be a tin hatter or something like that. So I have sympathy for them, but it must be a very hard life to lead. Okay, now, my Crusader gene. Well, I'm a young guy before all of this, when I was starting to learn about what was going on in the world in the way of real politics, international politics, and what's happening to our government and our system of checks and balances and the principles behind the 10 amendments to the Constitution, freedom of speech, for example, freedom of assembly, and so forth. And I got thinking about those things, and my first discovery was that the United Nations was not what I was taught in school. That was a big red pill for me to swallow. I found out that it was just the opposite of everything I'd been told. And so that shocked me to my core. And I was working for a large corporation at the time. I was in the insurance business, doing insurance underwriting and healthcare plan development and administration for a large insurance company. And I was climbing the corporate ladder. And I had figured out that this was going to be a cushy job for me. I wanted to stay in my original path, which was entertainment and drama and all that stuff. I wanted to go to Hollywood and be the next Cecil B. DeMille or something. Well, that didn't turn out so well. And so I went to work got a real job with a real corporation, and I became a young corporate guy. And that's when I ran into this stuff about the United Nations and the world in which we live. And I discovered that up until then, I had been totally wrapped up in myself. You know, I'm going to get money. I'm going to make money. I'm with a corporation now. I'm going to be a vice president for sure. Before I retire, I'm going to New York. I'm going to live in a penthouse. I'll probably have a chauffeur. And look, I'm driving a new car and all of this. I was all about me and my family. And how am I looking? And how am I having fun? You know, am I at the top of the heap yet? It was all me, like it is with a lot of young people. And when I started thinking about what was happening to our country, I surprised myself because my crusader gene, as I call it, started to vibrate. I began to think for the first time in my life, what am I going to do about it? I have a responsibility. Oh my gosh, I've got this family, I've got this wife, and I've got these kids, and they're mine. I mean, I did that, you know, it's all my responsibility. I've got to take care of them. Well, that was partially solved by making money, you know. If I make money, I'll take care of the kids and the wife and have the house and all that. But now, what about their freedom? What about their health? All these things. So I started to think about my obligations to something beyond myself, something bigger than myself, even bigger than my family, bigger than my community, even bigger than my nation, and finally, even bigger than the whole world. There's something out there that's bigger than me, a lot bigger. And that was a side of me I had never really felt before. I'm glad that happened in a way because it's made me a more content person with all of the things that happen that are not very nice along the way. I think, well, it's meant to happen, you know. As that little piece called Desiderata says, no matter what happens, just remember the universe is unfolding exactly as it should. So that was part of my crusader gene. But then I realized it should unfold depending on what I do. So I was in that equation after all. So that's all. I'm stretching that idea too far. It's just that I think most of us have this capacity to get outside of our skin once we have to, once we get really serious and turn off all the distractions like television and radio and all the music thumping in the background. Sometimes people don't have any silence or quiet time to think about these things. They're so wrapped up in group activity, the noise and fun and eating and playing sports and watching Dancing with the Stars and listening to the newscaster tell you what to think, but they don't have any original thoughts of their own that come out of their own soul. So anyway, I think it's in everybody. If they'll just close down all the noise and listen and let it come up, it'll come up. That's what I mean by my crusader gene. And I think everybody has one, but they have to be allowed to come out.
Excellent, Ed. Thank you very much for all of that. I have a few questions for you, and I don't think these questions, maybe they haven't been asked before. If they have, but I know you were recently asked at 93. By the way, you look not a day over 55, so that's my information to you. So I got joke.
My line on that is, I don't. I'm 93, but I don't. They say I don't look a day over 90.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, I had the pleasure to be at your 90th birthday party at Red Pill Expo in Jekyll Island, and you mentioned a couple of things that I still carry with me. One was you mentioned meeting Dad was your second most influential thing in your life that changed your life, and so. I like to quote that, but you also were recently asked if you still take Laetrile. At 93, do you need it anymore? So I don't want to misquote you. Do you still take Laetrile to this day?
Of course. Yeah, of course. I eat apricot seed once in a while, but quite regularly. And my wife takes care of it if I am not so regular. She says it's time for your Laetrile tablet. So yeah, I take not every day. Tablets have a good quantity. I think the average person, I'm in this sense, I'm an average person. If I didn't take the tablets now and then, I would probably make sure I took some apricot seeds, a couple of them at least, almost every day. But you don't need a lot of this stuff as long as it's regular and continuing. So I probably take I'm going to guess on average about 1 or 2 tablets a week. And the rest of the time, I'll eat a few apricot seeds now and then.
Great, thank you. So everybody heard it from the horse's mouth. So tell me a little bit about, you and I have laughed about the wonderfully produced movie called World Without Cancer. Tell me a little bit about the story about how that came about. What was the reason you made that movie, World Without Cancer? And tell me what the intention of it was.
Well, I think the motivation for making the film was because I wanted to reach a larger audience with a message than I could reach with the book. The book was selling quite well. I mean, considering its topic and that it was published by me, a little unknown publisher, and nobody, bookstores wouldn't take it. So I had to do it myself if I wanted to have it out there. So I wanted to reach a larger audience. And I thought, well, we should create an organization, which we did. And then we have to give people in that organization made up primarily of cancer survivors and cancer victors whose lives had been saved by Laetrile and their families. And I wanted to give them a tool so they could show the story in pictures and sound at group meetings rather than just say, here, go read this book. So that was the motivation for doing it. And what I just tried to do is summarize the key points that are in the book in such a way that they could be presented in this little film. Well, in the original form of the film was film strip, is what we used to call them. It was just like a PowerPoint presentation. It was a series of still pictures, and they was projected on a screen by a little portable projector, and you had advanced the scene frame by frame with a knob, and you put a recording on the little phonograph system part of it, and it would play the soundtrack through the PA system. And every time it was time to go to the next picture, there'd be a beep in the soundtrack. Then the operator would turn the knob, and the next picture would come up. That's how it all started. That's what it was. Those were film strips, and there were a lot of them in those days. Very low budget compared to what we do today. But that's how it started and what it was. Later on, we took that same film strip and just converted it to video. So if you see it in video form today, it's basically the same as it was then without the beeps. That's about it.
I love that story. And for years, it was on YouTube. I think I'm guessing 10 years, maybe you'll correct me. It was on YouTube, and it was stopped at 350,000 views, even though I've known thousands of people that saw it on YouTube. And as we're both aware, it was taken off of YouTube 3 months ago, and all the thousands of comments of people that watched it. And what did you feel about that one? What do you think 3 months ago? Was there anything that you think precipitated them removing it? Do you think it's because we're making a difference again about this subject? Or what's your opinion about why they removed it just 3 months ago off of YouTube?
Well, I hadn't really thought about that, John. I just assumed that the generic answer is because they don't want the truth out there. And of course, they never did. And it could be that they just finally are getting around to it. I think that the pattern of removing stuff from the internet is growing. I think they're getting more efficient at it, and I think they're getting more aggressive, because I honestly believe that they're hoping that in the next few years they'll actually have a complete Orwellian website, or I should say internet, where there's absolutely zero truth. And so I think they're getting more aggressive about cleaning up some of the little things on the side that they had let go in the past. But maybe they realize that there are more people learning about it. If I were on the other side, I would have observed that, and I would have said, all right, comrades, we have a task now. You go and you do that, and I go do this, and by Thursday we'll have them all done, right? Yes, sir. You know, that sort of thing. And either way, it's our enemy is doing it, and that they're the enemies of truth, they're the enemies of humankind. If that doesn't make your crusader gene vibrate, I don't know what does.
It absolutely does, Ed. And as you know, with your permission, we've reposted it onto Rumble channel, and now it's getting thousands of views on Rumble. And yeah, so. And recently, you told me that you've re-edited your book 24 times. Is that how many times that you've re-released, or not re-released, edited it, updated it? I don't want to put words in your mouth. So I always like to be correct, like the dog and the cat story. I always like to be correct. How many times has World Without Cancer been updated? And give us any instance of when the bad guys have proven you to be wrong in any situation in that book.
Well, first of all, I don't remember the number. I'm sort of buckled down here with my microphone, or I could go and pull it up in the
I'll
bookshelf.
help you. It's it just had its 27th printing
in 2020.
in 2020. I think you upgraded a little bit, so I'll help you
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah. But I think it's the 24th. But anyway, it's a lot of numbers for a book like that. I never thought it was number 2. But, so anyway, okay, 24. So I just remembered it. And they're pretty good sized printings too. It's not like on demand. The response has been amazingly strong. And of course, the film strip has been seen by a huge number of people. We even have a DVD out there floating around with just the soundtrack, and that by itself tells the story. And I think that's been pirated by a lot of people, where they make copies of it. And every once in a while, we get a copy of the CD that's got a problem in it. They say, "We want our money back." Well, we didn't sell it to you. Somebody pirated our DVD. And I'm happy to see that, because, you know, you can make a buck or something on a DVD, but the pleasure you get knowing that somebody's life has been saved is much greater than that. So, well, anyway, the rest of it is.
Well, what I asked, I'm not putting words in your mouth. So how many times have they been able to come up with something in World Without Cancer they've proven that you were wrong about?
Let me think. No, it's 0, fortunately. What a relief thought. Well, they were one of my best selling books. I'm in deep water, way over my head. As I said before, I'm the last person really in the world to take on the banking industry, take on the pharmaceutical industry. Are you kidding? You know, these are the biggest lobbies, the most criminal organizations in the world. And I've taken on them both without thinking about it, without realizing that I'm taking on the big boys. I thought, well, this story just has to be told. Oh, naive, you know. But there has been, I thought in both cases, boy, I'm going to be slaughtered. I don't mean physically slaughtered, that comes later, but they're going to pick these books apart and find errors in them and hold them up and say, "See, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about." You know, I knew that was going to happen. I only had one like that in Creature from Jekyll Island, and I got the wrong czar. Nicholas III. I should have been the 4th or something like that. Some professor said, "See, he made a mistake." And that was the only one. I can't believe it. And I'm just lucky. That's all. That's just it.
I disagree. I think you're a hero, Ed, and I can't believe that I've had the fortune of knowing you for as many years. And like I said, we're gonna keep going until you're 120, because I'm gonna beat you there. So I think I'm catching up, but all these stories are some of my favorites. So I always want to make sure that I get the stories right. So if you would indulge me, you had a story that you told me one time about wanting to become the apricot seed king.
Oh my God.
I know. And if you want to defer and say, "John, I'd rather not," I'm okay with that. I'll accept it. But it's one of my favorite stories, and I'm saving it for now. And again, if you feel comfortable telling the story about wanting to be the apricot seed king, I'd love to hear it.
Well, I don't mind. It's silly, really. I was so I was so naive. Okay, the story. Well, I decided that if we're lucky, we do our job, there's going to be a big increase in demand for apricot seeds. Maybe there's a business opportunity here. And so I said, where do the apricot seeds come from? And I found out there was one place in Northern California. Forgot the name of the company, doesn't make any difference. And they sold these seeds in bags, big bags, filled out bags full of seeds. I thought, well, they're getting them from someplace. Where do they get them? Well, they get them from the apricot seed growers in that general area. And I thought, well, maybe I could buy them and get them from the same growers, and I could sort of get in, at least into the market. And so I went up and paddled around in Northern California, and I went to the seed company that sold those things, and I was told that it was owned by the mafia at that time. So I was very careful of what I was doing and saying and so forth. But they were very good people that I talked to, and probably even the owners were at some level to normal people like the rest of us. And it looked like a good business. So they offered to sell them to me in large quantities. And so I started to buy them in large quantities and package them. And I had a little company I formed, and I sold them as in seed form, bags of seeds, and also crushed them up and put them in little grinders, like like a seed grinder or a pepper grinder, and sold them as a flavoring for food. And we were running a good business on that. And then I wanted to, let's jump this up. Maybe we can go international with this. I got these big ideas in my mind. So I went to that area, and I went from farmer to farmer, and I asked them if they would be willing to sell me their apricot seeds. I said, sell them to you. Heck, we'll give them to you if you just take them off of our hands. Because they were, taking the seeds out of the apricots and selling the flesh to a canning company. And so we had these mountains of apricot seeds, and my eyes are spinning. And look at all those apricot seeds out there. And they're going to pay me to haul them away. I got the idea. I'll find somebody to build a machine to crack the apricot shell, hard shell that's around. Those are very hard. If you've never tried to open an apricot seed, you'll know the shell around the seed is very, very hard to crack. And often when you do crack it, it splinters into sharp pieces, shards. And you don't want to sell those for people to eat. They could cut them, This has got to be done very carefully. Now, the seed company had a process for doing that, but they're not telling anybody how they did it. And so I got the rumor that, they heat them, and then the shell expands, and finally it breaks open on its own. You don't crush it and so forth. Then they rumble it through a filter. Anyway, so I hired an engineer to figure this out and build a machine to do it. And he did. He built this machine. It cost me practically all my savings. And then I decided to start buying. I actually paid to the farmers a little bit for their kernels, and I paid to have them picked up. And I had, now what am I going to do with them? I have to put them someplace. So I found some farmer out in the middle of this country up there that had just put a new, what you might call a warehouse. It was a big metal shed, nothing in it, in the middle of one of his fields. And I remember I asked him, what was this for? He said, I figured I was going to have to store some wheat or something here, maybe some apricot seeds. And really, yeah, it says, look, I built up the cement on the whole thing, so it's about 6 or 8 inches above the ground. So, if you get water through here, it won't come up and into the cement, because I want to put these things on the ground and I want them away from the water. Oh, that's smart. Well, that happens to be why I'm interested. I want a place to store a mountain of apricot seeds. Could I rent your place while you're waiting around for this? He said, sure. So, okay, I leased his big metal barn. I got all the trucks lined up. I got the contracts with the growers, and I was going to become the apricot king in no time at all. Because as soon as my machine was working, I'm going to start producing this stuff. So I got all that stuff moved to this beautiful warehouse. It's all up high and dry on the cement. And then I'm ready. Part of the process is you have to bring it out and spread it on a huge area to dry it out, get the moisture out, and then you put it back inside to store it. Okay. Fast forward. The rains came. And they came. And they came some more. It turned out to be one of the wettest years that anybody could remember. And where that warehouse was, the water started to pool. And it got higher and higher and higher. Finally got to the cement and over it and ran in and soaked up all of my mountain of apricot pits. And it was just soggy wet for weeks and weeks, and they mildewed. and by the way, my machine was delivered and it didn't crack the apricot. There was the apricot king sitting on a mountain of moldy apricots and frozen king. And I was through.
That's why you left it to your good friend's sons. You left it to your good friend. So that is one of my favorite stories. Your wife, I know your wife has told me, oh man, I was mad at him at that point. So
I was not popular, no.
So Ed, thank you. God bless you. Thank you for being here with all of us. But I would be remiss if I didn't say, I know you're a very humble man, but how can people support your mission, the Red Pill University? I know we just had the Red Pill Expo, and I'm going to brag to everybody. Ed told me in person that we were the #1 affiliate to get people to go to watch the Red Pill Expo. So we appreciate that. But I got to brag a little bit, Ed, but how can people support your mission to continue telling people the truth? Because you were one of the only people, as I was a kid, besides Dad, who told people about both the financial world, the scam going on with the big banks and the Federal Reserve, and the scam going on in nutrition. Many times the left liked, Dad was kind of a hero of the hippies and things like that. In the 1970s, the hippies loved him, even though he was talking about a natural answer to cancer. But so it's kind of like you were one of the first people that really brought both of those together, and I still commend you for that. But how can people help you tomorrow, today, and continue your mission with Red Pill University, Red Pill Expos, and anything else that Gio Griffin still has the energy to you? I get emails back from you at 2:00 in the morning. So how can this audience of a lot of people that have the Crusaders gene help you, Ed?
Well, it depends on each person, I suppose, and what they want to do and what they're capable of doing, what their talents are, and so forth. So let's start at the beginning. Get on my mailing list. And the easiest way to do that is to go to our newsletter page, which is, we produce a free newsletter, goes out 3 times a week, called needtoknow.news. Need to know, all one word, needtoknow.news. And sign up for our free newsletter, and then you'll get all of our mailings on everything we're doing. And so from there, you can sort of pick and choose what appeals to you. We have a lot of things going, but the most active ones right now is what we call the Red Pill Project, or in our own back room, we call it Project Outreach, because it's a way of reaching out to people who maybe aren't as deep into it as we are. They understand that, there's something wrong out there and we have to do something about it. And we're looking to reach to huge numbers right now. So the first thing to do is get on our mailing list, and then talk it up. Let other people come in and get on our mailing list. And go over to Red Pill Expo right now. We've just finished the expo, as you said, and all of our speakers, 2 days of dynamite speakers, are on a replay. It's all free. Take a look at that. And then if you want to help us and get on the bandwagon, so to speak, and help us, well, join Red Pill University or become a patron of it. It starts at $3 a month, so there's a level there for everybody. And if you have deep pockets, you can go as high as you wish. We need the money to pay the bills, of course. But the main thing is then get into, we're forming campuses right now. We call them campuses of Red Pill University. Now, they're not brick and mortar campuses. They're local organizations of activists who want to make it, who start to change the world from the bottom up. Everybody wants to go to the top and build down. They say, well, who are you going to vote for president? You know, oh my gosh, by the time you get up there, it's all over. They just ignore the fact that you got to have a sheriff in your local community that you can trust. You got to have a city council, and a mayor, and a board of supervisors, and a board of education. That's where you start to build these movements. And so we want people who want to become leaders at the local community and active in the things we call red pill campuses. But there's a different level for everybody depending on their aptitudes and their interests and their ability. So the start point is sign up for our newsletter, and I'll see you there.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Also, go to realityzone.com to buy your books. I'm not going to even say for people to go to my website and buy the books. I want them to go directly to you, get the books there. Of course, getting the paperback helps you because so many people have stolen. I think you told me one time you sold several millions of copies of Creature from Jekyll Island, but probably many millions more have been duplicated and stolen from you. So you're not a person that goes after those people, but people can support you best by going to your website rather than buying from Amazon. Would that be a safe assumption?
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah,
absolutely.
Come directly to the source.
Yes, exactly. That's why I tell people too. So we want to support the people that care about us. But I'm going to open it up to, if you don't mind, Ed, to a couple questions, 2 or 3 questions. You have a question right back there.
Can I ask a creature question?
Sure.
So there's a lot of discussion about ending the Fed. And I keep looking at that thinking, how are they going to do that? Because this is a privately owned institution, correct? That's loaned all of this money.
John, can you repeat the question?
Yes, he's saying they keep talking about ending the Fed. Is that a possibility because it's a private institution? What are your thoughts about that?
It's a definite possibility. It has to be. It's, in fact, it's very simple. The trouble is, it's very hard. It's things to be hard. The Federal Reserve was created by an act of Congress. It could be abolished by an act of Congress. So that's simple. But the hard part is that we have to now change a lot of nameplates in Washington, D.C. who are congressmen. And that's the hard part. Because the ones that are there, for the most part, forget it. You're wasting your time. They're Congressman Jones. You should know about what's going on out in the real world. I just discovered something, and you should know this too. Believe me, they either already know it or they don't care. Most of those guys are suede shoe con artists. And you have to realize that. If we're going to make a difference in our political world, we have to understand that its present state is corrupt. And nothing is going to change until we clean out the corruption. You start there. And that's why these campuses are so important. We've got to get influence over who we vote for at the local level and then move up. So once we get the right people in Congress and in the Senate, and by the way, these will be people who don't want to run for office. Think about that.
Yeah.
We're looking for people who don't want to run. They're doing it because they feel it's their obligation. It's their crusader gene that compels them to do that. Not because they want to be a congressman and make a lot of money and get all the accolades. They're there because they want to work for America. That's where we start.
Awesome. A couple questions? Anybody have a question? Okay. Yes. Joe Hoxa.
If you could,
if
if you could talk a little bit about when Sloan Kettering was brought Laetrile to the FDA, and it was shut down because you couldn't patent a naturally occurring substance, and then subsequently they basically just tried to denigrate their own study because now the genie was out of the bottle.
Can you talk a couple minutes about what your understanding of Sloan Kettering? I've gained a new appreciation of that whole thing. It's more complicated than ever, but could you give a couple minutes about Sloan Kettering's study in the early 70s, how they proved that Laetrile stopped the metastases of cancer, and then the cover-up, basically, why they covered it up?
Sure. That was a very important point in history, I think, and that's the reason as I recall, I devoted 1 chapter to it, maybe 2, but anyway, it's in the book. But it needs to be retold over and over again. Sloan Kettering is generally considered to be a very prestigious, a very honorable institution, medical institution for research and therapy. And And it is, it's very well known and very well revered, and everybody thinks if Sloan Kettering says something is true, you can count on it. Well, it turns out that the Sloan Kettering Institute is owned by primarily the pharmaceutical industry, with the dominant ownership in the hands of the Rockefeller Trust. It was the building was, as I recall, was built by Rockefellers. They donated it. The Rockefellers have made huge grants to the organization. Every time you look at the board of directors, you'll find at least one. At least I haven't looked at it in a long time, but when I was looking back in the day, there were 2 board members that were from the Rockefeller group, call it that, business group. And so the institution itself is an extension of the pharmaceutical industry, posing as an independent research organization. Now, in the beginning, when they were attempting to scare people away from Laetrile, they thought, well, we got a plan. We'll tell the world that we're going to have the institution do the study of Laetrile and see, and they'll tell us if it really works or not. And so Sloan was given the job of investigating this thing called Laetrile, and they were going to test it on rats, and they were going to do all kinds of analysis, and they'll tell us whether it's fraud or really the real thing. So that's how it started, and I have forgotten how long they took to do that, but I'm going to guess it was probably at least a year. And so there's a lot of hoopla about, hey, we're finally going to get to the core of this. Well, we found out primarily from insiders of Sloan Kettering who were so disgusted with what was happening that they spilled the beans. They were whistleblowers. And one of them was Ralph, I've forgotten his last name.
Ralph Moss.
Do you
Ralph
remember?
Moss. Yeah, Ralph Moss. He's still alive. Ralph Moss.
Yeah, Ralph Moss. He was, I think, in charge of the public relations. And he was aware that in the laboratory where they were doing the mouse studies, that the head, not physician, but the research doctor there was Kinemitsu Segura, a Japanese fellow who was highly regarded everywhere in the industry as one of the best research people you could find. And he was head of the Sloan Kettering research group that was given the task of studying the effect of Laetrile on cancer. And Dr. Segura, early in the project, said that he had never seen anything early in the project, never seen anything so positive in his life as this product, as amygdalin. He said, this stuff appears to be working. Everything is looking good. And the minute the word leaked out that Segura was getting good results, they took it away from him. They said, the old man he's finally gone over the edge. He's lost his edge. We got to give it to somebody that knows what's going on. He was okay in his day, but he's over now, because this is absurd. So they took the project away from him. Well, Ralph Moss knew that, and he decided that he was going to tell the story. And so he did. Well, they fired him, of course.
Yep.
And he held a press release, and then later he was fired. And he said in response to the press release, he said, I was fired because I failed to perform my most fundamental obligation to the Sloan Kettering, which is to lie. And so that was the big feather in our cap, and you could hang on to that for quite a while. But meanwhile, what happened to the experiments? They took it away from Segura and gave it to another researcher there at Kettering, as I recall. And that went on for a few months, and it was coming out pretty good too. Like, wait a minute, you didn't get the message. They took it away from him, and they decided to send it outside of Sloan Kettering. And they sent it to a couple, I've forgotten how many. I think there were 2 other groups that they sent it to. The third one was getting positive results or neutral results. And they took it away from them and then finally gave it to somebody, I've forgotten the names now, but not associated with Sloan Kettering at all. And he found what they were looking for. His report said there's no evidence of any difference between the mice that are treated with amygdalin and that are not treated with amygdalin. So therefore, there is no reason to believe that this substance, amygdalin, has any therapeutic value at all in the treatment of cancer. That's what they were looking for. That's what they published. And when the press release or the press conference happened, when Sloan Kettering was to announce this to the world, there were a lot of reporters there with cameras and everything. This is a big deal, you know. Back in the day, this was a big news item. And so the president of Sloan Kettering announced what the findings were of that fourth group. And said, therefore, our job is done, and we've proven that Laetrile is not effective in the treatment of cancer. And one of the news people there noticed Dr. Segura standing in the back of the room. He was not invited to the table to be among the researchers who spoke of their research. He was at the back of the room like an observer. And the newspaper reporter noticed him. And at one point, he shouted out to Segura. He said, Dr. Segura, do you still stick to your story about Laetrile being effective? And Segura says, I stick. So, this is basically the story. They cherry picked the data, and they refused. And this is the prestigious medical establishment that Americans revere, you know, as the last answer in what is good for cancer. And they're crooks. They're just as, that's what you find us everywhere you look. And if that doesn't make your crusader gene vibrate, I don't know what will either.
Well, it certainly makes my crusader gene vibrate, and you make my crusader gene. Does it make everybody else here? This group gathered together, and primarily after you said you would do this, and they told this assembled group that we were going to get together 4 people or 20 people. We didn't know we'd get 65 or 70 people that are committed to bringing back the Cancer Control Society events in September. I'm telling you now so you can get it on your schedule so that maybe we can do another one of these there. But we're going to hold the next Cancer Control Society event in September here in Scottsdale, Arizona. And all of these people, someone described them as sticks of dynamite that their fuses have been lit. So I thank you again, Ed. Thank you so much. We're going to show a video from Ed Group next, who filmed it today, talking about his story of Laetrile. I want to make sure you get a copy of it sent to you, because I'm told it's pretty emotional about his story, Dr. Ed Group from Global Healing. So my great thanks to you. Thanks for being here. It's made a difference in everybody's life. So God bless you, and say hi to Pat for me.
I certainly will. And I'm thanks for inviting me. You can't really see all these points off there. Thank you so much.
Just an announcement for anybody that wants to watch this or share with anybody. It's going to be on Doc of Detox on time. So anybody wants to share it, that's what we're here
All
for.
the rules are up there.
Remember to support Ed and his Red Pill Expo organization, and all those amazing speeches are there available for free. I can't believe you can do that. So he needs our support, but they're available for free on the redpillexpo.org organization. You can watch them right now. Am I right, Ed? Right now, you can watch those videos for free. Amazing. Dr. Brian Artis, a good friend of mine, Dr. Siegel, who treats animals with Laetrile. She did a great hour, and so many more, including Ed. And Robert Scott Bell was there doing that as well. So God bless, Ed. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your week.